You tell your child to be respectful. They roll their eyes. They talk back. They shut down. And the harder you push, the less respect you actually get. But in Malaysia, researchers noticed something different. Children weren't constantly reminded to behave. They weren't threatened with consequences. Yet respect showed up naturally, even when adults weren't watching. In this video, I'll walk you through the one rule behind that, and the 4 principles this research uncovered that quietly shape kind, respectful kids from the inside out. And once you see it, the way we usually try to teach respect starts to look completely backwards. This comes from a 2024 cross-cultural study led by researchers examining parenting styles in Malaysia, China, and Taiwan, published in an international child development journal. They followed families with young children and looked at something very specific. Not grades, not obedience, not rule following. They measured children's social behaviour, emotional well-being, and how respect showed up in everyday life, especially when adults weren't actively correcting them. Here's what stood out. Children in Malaysian families showed higher levels of internalized respect and prosocial behaviour. They were more likely to cooperate, more likely to show restraint, more likely to treat others kindly, on their own. And this wasn't linked to stricter rules or harsher discipline. It was linked to how adults carried authority in daily interactions. Respect wasn't demanded. It was modeled. That difference is the key to everything that follows. Most of us think respect is something children owe adults. Say please. Listen the first time. Do what you're told. But the researchers noticed something subtle. In Malaysian families, respect wasn't treated like a behaviour to enforce. It was treated like a relationship to maintain. Adults didn't chase respect with reminders or lectures. They assumed their role calmly. They spoke with restraint. They corrected without humiliation. And children responded by mirroring that tone. This flips the usual script. Instead of asking, how do I make my child respect me? The better question becomes, what kind of authority am I modelling? Because the study shows respect forms from exposure, not pressure. Children absorb how power is handled long before they understand rules. That's the foundation of the Malaysian approach. And it leads to one simple rule that shapes everything else. The rule is simple. Respect flows down first. In the family studied, adults didn't wait for children to earn respect. They gave it first, through tone, posture, patience, and self-control. Not permissive, not indulgent, still clearly in charge, but authority was shown without aggression. Instructions were calm. Corrections were measured. Disagreements didn't turn into power struggles. And because children experienced respect from above, they didn't have to be forced into showing it back. They absorbed it. The research links this downward flow of respect to stronger cooperation and prosocial behaviour over time. Not because children were trying to please adults, but because respect became the normal emotional climate. That single rule shapes everything that comes next, and it shows up in 4 quiet principles that Malaysian parents practice without fanfare. The first one is about authority and how it's held without raising your voice. Principle 1 is authority without aggression. In the study, adults didn't compete with children for control. They didn't rush to overpower behaviour with volume, threats, or urgency. Authority showed up quietly. Instructions were short. Tone stayed even. Emotions stayed regulated, When a child pushed back, the adult didn't escalate. They paused. They repeated themselves calmly. They stayed steady. That steadiness mattered. The researchers found that children were more cooperative when authority felt predictable, not reactive. Aggression creates compliance in the moment, but it teaches children that power equals force. Calm authority teaches something else. That leadership can exist without intimidation. Over time, children in these families didn't test limits as often. Not because they were afraid, but because they trusted. The adult would stay in control. Respect didn't come from being overpowered. It came from being guided by someone who didn't lose themselves when things got hard. The second principle builds on this. Because authority only works when children know where they stand in the relationship. Principle 2 is clear hierarchy with warmth. In the Malaysian families studied, children weren't treated as equals in decision-making, but they were treated as valued people. Adults led. Children followed. And that line was clear. There wasn't constant negotiation. There weren't endless explanations in the heat of the moment. But there also wasn't coldness. Warmth showed up in tone, in patience, in how adults stayed emotionally available even while holding the boundary. The research found that this combination mattered. When hierarchy was clear and emotionally safe, children showed more respect without needing reminders. They weren't confused about who was in charge. And because they felt secure in that structure, they didn't need to challenge it constantly. When hierarchy is unclear, children test. When hierarchy is harsh, children resist. But when hierarchy is warm and steady, children relax into it. That calm acceptance is where cooperation grows. Not from fear, not from equality, but from knowing exactly where they belong. The next principle explains what happens when correction is needed, and how respect is either preserved or quietly destroyed in those moments. Principle 3 is correction without disrespect. In the study, misbehaviour didn't trigger embarrassment or public shaming. Adults corrected behaviour, but they protected the child's dignity. Corrections were brief, often private, and focused on what needed to change, not who the child was. No sarcasm, no humiliation, no using shame to force compliance. The researchers noted something important here. Children were more likely to accept correction when it didn't threaten their sense of worth. Disrespectful correction creates surface obedience. Children comply, but internally, respect erodes. Respectful correction does the opposite. It teaches children that boundaries can exist without emotional harm. Over time, children in these families didn't just behave better. They corrected themselves more often, because respect wasn't something they had to protect themselves from. It was something they felt safe maintaining. That safety sets up the final principle, the one that determines whether respect sticks when no one is there to enforce it. Principle 4 is modelling over moralizing. In the research, children weren't taught respect through lectures. They learned it by watching. How adults spoke to elders. How they treated service workers. How they handled frustration with other adults. Respect wasn't explained. It was demonstrated again and again. The study found that children mirrored the social tone around them. When adults showed restraint, children showed restraint. When adults showed consideration, children followed. Moralizing asks children to act one way while watching adults act another. That gap weakens respect. Modelling closes the gap. It gives children a live example of how power and care can exist together. This is why respect in these families didn't disappear when adults left the room. Children weren't remembering rules. They were repeating a way of being they had lived inside. And that's what turns respect from something enforced into something internal. This is the part that matters. This isn't a Malaysian magic trick. It's not about copying a culture. The reason this works across cultures is because the study compared families in more than one place. Malaysia, China, and Taiwan. And the pattern wasn't about one special phrase or one strict rule. It was about the same thing everywhere. Children absorb how authority is handled. They copy the emotional climate. They learn what respect feels like before they can even explain what respect is. So when adults lead with calm authority, children learn restraint. When adults correct without humiliation, children learn dignity. When adults show respect in daily interactions, children learn respect as a normal way of living. That's why you can apply this anywhere. Not by adopting Malaysian customs, but by adopting the direction. Respect flows down first. And children mirror what they live inside. Now let's translate this into what you can actually do at home without changing your whole personality. Here's what this looks like at home. Not a new system, not a script, just a few quiet shifts. When you give an instruction, slow down, stand still. Lower your voice. Say it once, clearly. If your child resists, don't rush to overpower it. Repeat the boundary. Stay calm. Let your steadiness do the work. When correction is needed, protect dignity. Move closer. Speak privately if you can. Correct the behaviour, not the child. And watch how you model respect when you're frustrated, in traffic, at the store, with other adults. Because the research shows children are always learning how power is used, not from what we say, but from what they see. You don't need to demand respect more often. You need to demonstrate it more consistently. That's how respect becomes something your child carries, not something you have to chase. And here's the takeaway. Respect doesn't grow from being enforced upward. It grows from being lived downward. When children experience calm authority, warm structure, and dignity in correction, they don't need reminders to be respectful. They already know how it feels. If this shifted how you think about respect, like and subscribe. And in the comments, tell me. What's one small moment where you could lead with steadiness instead of pressure? Because respect isn't taught in speeches. It's learned in the way we show up every single day.